So I've been using Kanna, Sceletium Tortuosum, for like, what's so crazy, it's only been 2.5 hours. I've just been, to be completely honest, been smoking it. I mixed it with the weed, did a few bumps, smoked some more with the weed, and yeah, it only lasts like, when you smoke it only lasts like an hour, but the hour is like extended, right? And I've, it's the first time I've tried to talk since I've taken it, and it's harder to talk than I thought it would be. I don't know, I was just sitting here thinking, I was kind of getting emotional, kind of put you in your feels sometimes, and I was just thinking about life, and I was just thinking about how so many people are looking for this. They're looking for that magical experience that changes their life. And be careful what you wish for, because that magical experience might happen. And when that magical experience happens, it might not be what you thought it was. That's what I figured out with the psychedelics. That's what I figured out with these plants, with these herbs. Some people might look at what I do and how I've been using plants and how I use plants, every week, and how I use different ones, and I explore and I experience, and some people look at it like, yo, you're no different than a drug addict. And the main difference here is, one, the substances I am using, and two, the intention of why I'm using it. And, I'm sitting here, I'm looking for something. But realistically, I'm not really looking for anything. Life is a paradox, right? Realistically, I'm not looking for anything. I'm just exploring, and whatever I come across. And if it's good, I experience it some more. If I like it, I experience it some more. If I don't, I don't. I've used ashwagandha a few times, and I personally prefer gynostema. If I'm going to take an adaptogen, I prefer to take gynostema. Some people call it giagulan, but I prefer to take that instead of ashwagandha. It's just, I use herbs for a different reason, though. Right now I've been using more shamanic herbs, you can call it. Ashwagandha and gynostema, those are adaptogens that I feel like are like no different. I mean, they're less than a cup of coffee. They're more like medicinal health herbs, right? And it's not that shamanic herbs aren't medicinal, because shamanic herbs are very medicinal. It's just shamanic herbs are usually very powerful. And when an herb or a substance is extremely powerful, it can punch you in the face, and it can frighten you. It can, with psychedelics, people call it a bad trip, quote unquote, but there is no such thing as a bad trip. There's just, that is what the trip is, right? It shows you your negative shit in your head. If you got any dumb shit in your head, it reveals it to you. Like, if you're an asshole, then the psychedelic will show you you're an asshole. And when you come back down from the psychedelic experience, you now get to sit down and think about how much of an asshole you are. And it's like, but because of that, they have the potential to change you, because you can see what the problem is. So many people don't realize they have a problem until the psychedelics show you something, but then you call it a bad trip, because you're sitting there saying, "Oh, I had a bad trip. I was sitting there thinking about my fucked up childhood, or this got brought up, or I started crying," or that's what's supposed to happen, right? Like, sometimes when I take Kanna, there's some powerful shit, right? So it can be when used correctly. But then I was also thinking to myself, why is it that so many people don't get this experience? Why don't they get this. Like, you know how, like, so there's been motherwort's a plant that's been used for hundreds, thousands of years. I mean, originally it was used for childbirth and postpartum depression, and for women, that's why it's called motherwort. But like, I've been using it shamanically. It's become a shamanic tool of mine. Like, in my shamanic toolkit, motherwort's there, blue lotus is there, cannabis is there, Kanna, Sceletium Tortuosum is there, white lotus. I mean, like, these are shamanic herbs that I use, and I can get into my shamanic psychedelics, but that's a different category. With these herbs, it's like, why is it that, I don't know, like, so many people don't get the experience with the lotus either, right? And that's what I've noticed with these herbs. It's like hit or miss, right? It works for some people it doesn't. But I think that realistically the issue is maybe a blue lotus that you're getting isn't as potent as a blue lotus that I'm getting. Or maybe the blue lotus that you're getting is a different strain, because there's a lot of Nymphia strains and hybrids and mixtures. Nymphia caerulea is now hybrid mixed with a bunch of other shit. So, they all have slightly different effects. I mean, white lotus has a completely different effect than blue water lily, because they're technically in a different plant family. But it's like with Kanna, it's like hit or miss with people as well. Some people, will use Kanna, Sceletium Tortuosum, and say, oh, it didn't really work. And some people will say, no, it works great. And I think it's all based on, what type of, how you're using it, right? Because the way I use herbs a lot of times now is in extract form, because it's so much easier for me to dose out what I'm using, and so much easier to say, okay, this is how much it takes to get to this point, and this is how much it takes to get to this point. Like, this is just what I've been experimenting with lately. I've just been experimenting with what's the differences between when you smoke an extract compared to when you use it as a snuff. What's the difference between it when you smoke it and when you eat it? Like, you can have one substance, right? One extract that affects you differently, that acts like different substances depending on how you use it. If you smoke it, it might have a completely different effect than if you eat it. It's just, this is what I've been noticing. And with the Kanna, what I'm noticing right now is that, using it as a snuff and smoking it, I always smoke it, is what I've always done. Today was the first day I decided to use it as a snuff. I was like, whatever, might as well try. And I mean, it works. What's interesting is what I've noticed is there is slightly different effects, though. Like, it gives the same ballpark effect, but it's like using it as a snuff, I feel like, is a little more unpredictable. But when I smoke it, I feel like it's a little more predictable, meaning the effect of it is always like happy, this, that. No matter how much I use, I know what's gonna happen. Like, if I use too much, I end up like half unconscious but conscious, but I don't know, like awake but not awake, but like eyes kind of want to roll in the back of the head type shit, and like I just want to sit down and like maybe relax, or like, I don't know. And then when you smoke it, sometimes it can hit you pretty goddamn hard, so you might want to sit down for a little bit. I know my hands can sometimes vibrate or feel tingly or something, like you get this flush feeling all the way to the fingertips, but like when I use it as a snuff, it's a little more unpredictable. I could see that I don't know, like sadness could happen. Like, when I smoke it, for some reason, it's always smiles and happy, no matter how much I smoke, no matter what the dose is. I could, it's like, it doesn't matter. But when you use it as a snuff, I feel like it does matter, because, I feel like dose dependent, it can give you energy, or it can relax you, or, when you use it as a snuff, it can boost your mood, or sometimes it could bring your mood down depending on how you were feeling prior. But I feel like when you smoke it, it doesn't have that effect. It's just like, for me personally, it's just one thing when I smoke it, which is the kind of like a roll feeling. Now I always smoke it with cannabis, but and but it uh, but this is what I've been really diving with, right? Is extracts, and um, I've been actually experimenting with herbal snuffs and making my own herbal snuffs and doing a few other things and herbal smoking mixtures and this and that, and that's what I was originally getting into like 2-3 years ago, but I just got out of it for some reason. But getting back into it. Um, I have a few ideas, like a few ideas for I have a few business ideas. Like there's motherwort extract that I've been working on. I'm trying to make enough of it. I'm trying to make kilos of it to the point where I could sell it and get it out there. I'm also trying to get kilos of a few other extracts and other plant extracts and this and that, and start selling these things, because so many people will say that this didn't work or that didn't work, and I swear to God, it's just a method of how they're using it, and the quality of the herb, because it's just like weed. I mean, if I gave you some shitty ass weed, right? I mean, let's use nowadays. We have this example nowadays. Back in the day, you didn't have this example, but now we can say, imagine you were trying to smoke cannabis. Okay, you're trying to actually get really high off some cannabis. You've never been high before, and you have all these expectations. You watch these videos, you see these things, you see all this shit. Imagine you end up getting some cannabis from your store, and you end up sitting down to smoke some cannabis for the first time in history, and it ends up being CBD flower. You didn't know. You don't know the difference. You don't know any of it. You smoke it, and you sit there and be like, oh, this really didn't do much. It's not doing what as much as I thought it would. And then you're like, oh, it's not that good, right? That's the issue I feel like we have with a lot of herbs. The issue is that it's a quality issue, that sometimes, what I've noticed is with motherwort, it depends on when it's harvest, what time of year. There's many different, even though you can have Leonoris cardiaca, which is motherwort, there's many different strains of Leonoris cardiaca, because I've seen motherwort that looks almost like, where the leaves look like kind of dark purple like. I've seen motherwort where it looks just green as fuck. I've seen, there's multiple different terpene profiles on motherwort depending on which area it grows in. And this is the issue with every plant. Every plant. If you have a wild harvested plant, it's different than a like plantain type plant. The terpene profile is usually different. So this is why I've been getting into extracts more and learning how to make my own extracts and learning how to take a little bit of herb, extract everything out of it as possible, to the point where it's just as potent, right? Or I can make something very little very potent. And this is just what I've been trying to do. So I'm probably going to get all these extracts together, because I got this Kanna extract here, and I got this motherwort extract that I actually made that I'm not going to reveal yet. But I'll actually reveal. I'm not going to reveal this until I get my website up and running and shit. But that's a nice surprise for everyone. It's going to be dope. I'm just really just trying to get these out there to people, and because this is for the shamanic experience type people, the people that are looking for a shamanic experience, the people that are looking to be modern day shamans, to be completely honest, because we live in this world where people are like scared to say like modern day shamans, or they don't want to look egotistical, or they don't want to whatever. So, but it's like, we need to be ourselves. And if you are a modern day shaman, if you're someone who wants to explore, who wants to dive deep into psychedelics and learn and not just trip balls, but learn about the psychedelic realm and learn about dimensions and interdimensional beings, and if you want to learn about the plants and the herbs, because I personally believe that every plant has a soul, and these plants just have different perspectives on life. And my friend Phi is the one that told me that a long time ago. He said, well, he was talking about psychedelics, but he said like every psychedelic is like a different perspective of the psychedelic world, and it's completely true. And it's just like, I feel like every plant in general is just a different perspective. Like the plant's high, it's just showing you, its point of view on life and teaching you. And I feel like if you want to learn from these teachers, then I feel like the people who know how to get these teachers to work should express how to get this to work. And that's the thing, because Blue Lotus is a very powerful master plant, but people don't look at it that way because they can't really get it to work for them. But it's just, you know, I try to dive with plants that are safe enough for me to brew, like ayahuasca. Because you know how they brew ayahuasca? They brew it for hours, and they brew it until it's like, just a strong brew, or strong tea, which is like a concoction, but or decoction, whatever the hell it's called. But for me, I feel like the way to go. And sometimes, like, I'm working on extracts, so then it's just an easier way to do this, because you can't save a tea for that long. Teas only last so long in the fridge. Extracts last for years. If you have a dry powdered extract, then it lasts for years. If you have a full spectrum extract, it'll last for years in a container in a cool, dry place. So this is, my preferred method of ingestion with these things. But I also don't like to dive too deep with like pure white powder extracts, because I don't want to denature it too much. Like, I want it to still feel organic. And I mean, no matter what, if it's an organic molecule, it's going to feel organic, because it is the spirit of the plant. But I also just feel like, when it's in the extract form, that's like still brown or gold or green or whatever, when it's not just a white powder, I feel like it still has this more of this wholeness to it. And, these white powders are, I mean, these extracts in general, and white powder extracts, these are when you get into the risky territory, because it's like, what is a drug, right? What classifies something as a drug? And some of these extracts are so potent and powerful, I would consider them drugs. Some of these, and I know that, so some of these white powder extracts I'm going to be getting soon, I know these are going to be so potent and powerful that they would be considered drugs. But the difference between a drug, a shamanic tool, a medicine, and a poison is always the dose and the intention. So, I mean, take it for what it is. I can't stop you from using substances. Nobody on this planet can. All we can do is educate each other on the substances that we use, so other people are more educated. Like, if a plant gives you headaches, then you should say that. Before I leave, I'll say this, that the only negative side effect of Kanna that I've experienced is headaches. That's the only reason why I think it's not a huge recreational drug. Like, if Kanna did not cause headaches, it would be a huge recreational drug in this world. But because it causes headaches, and that makes it so you can only do so much in a night before you start getting a headache, it makes it so people can't really abuse it. And, people don't really like to go too high dosed with Kanna, because they don't want to risk getting the headache type shit. So, but today I've had a higher dose experience with Kanna than, I've had, I think, ever. And, the only thing I noticed is a slight headache. Not even really a headache. It's not even enough to call it a headache. It's just enough to say that there's something other than a euphoria in my head. Kind of feels like a little bit of a pressure, like right here type shit. But that's just, but that's just the side effect that I already knew of. So it's not, if I didn't know about it, like, it'd scare me type shit. And this is why I feel like we need to be educated on the substances we're using. Get educated on the LD50 of these substances. Get educated on, the dosage. What's a low dose? What's a high dose? What's a medium, dose? And go from there.